So,
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
all right, let's start it, Sashi.
Okay. All right, guys. We'll jump right into it. So we came up to chapter 14 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I think. Sharing. Jason, you wanna allow me to share? Okay. So I'm going to try to review some, but that's why we started this new format where every 2 weeks we will have a review session. And the idea is that, we have gone through a lot of different things in the past, and it will become harder and harder now to appreciate some of the ideas. So in chapter 14, if anybody was here, I think Fred was here. We covered these, the fact that the nature or the prakriti or the universe is filled with these three properties, sattva, tamas, and rajas, and everything is interacting with each other, and how one should not get tangled into those things. We'll cover a little more of that later on. And there at the tail end of chapter 14, Krishna says to Arjuna that I am the foundation of all of that, meaning that this is there is some foundation, and that's me, right? And so this I am is key. Who is this I is what the chapter 15 is all about. And then that I, a Purusha can mean a lot of things, but literally it means I. And there is the supreme I, if you will, Purushottam, that we will be introduced to here. So if you remember this journey on Gita, it starts, I try to look at this as Arjuna's journey towards Krishna. So there are four characters. There is a blind king who is hoarding a throne, which he has illegally obtained. And his son is the villain, Duryodhana, who Arjuna is trying to win that throne back. And he's the hero of the story, Mahabharata. And so Arjuna has a crisis on the battlefield where he suddenly gets this attack of being being kind and good and ethical. So he asked this question to his charioteer, Krishna, hey, why are we fighting this war? And this is like after building up the war to this point where now armies are about to kill each other. He has this thing about like, will I kill my family or should I? My brothers and sisters, my uncle, my grandpa, who I love so much, and my teachers on the other side, they're fighting from the evil side, actually. But we are good people. We should have the right conscience to not fight this war and walk away from this. And so how can I kill my family? Should I? And then there is a lot of I, me, mine in his question. Like, he is so much about his own ego that, he thinks that he's going to be able to kill all those other people and he's going to win. Granted that he's the best warrior at that time. But he's also having an identity crisis, right? So so many times this kind of stuff can happen to us even in real life, not just in the battlefield. Something crazy happens within the family, and then you start wondering, what is your identity as a mom, as a son, or as a teacher, or as part of the society? Like, what is this role that I'm playing? That is that which has become your identity. That comes to a crisis. And all the relations that you so believed all the time, start feeling false. So that is the state that this Gita starts at. And last week, we covered in depth why this state is absolutely necessary for somebody's growth. So one has to come to this state of existential crisis, if you will, to really grow out of it in a much stronger way, with a better understanding of how attachments has led to the problem where where they are in life. So chapter 1 starts there, and then there is a whole journey from 1 till 14, which some of you have missed. And now we are in chapter 15. We ask the same question: who am I, right? This time we are investigating Krishna's I. Throughout Gita, there is a lot of, hey, I, or come to me, and this and that, right? So there's a lot of me, I. Krishna is using as well. What is that me, right? And so this is the state, in summary, where any kind of insults or praises or likes and dislikes and desires, right? So last session, we talked about this identity crisis or dejection really stems from this ego or attachment to the identity and all the desires that follow after that, right? Desire to be a good warrior, desire to be a good grandson, desire to be this, desire to be that, and in our case, it could be all kinds of desires, right? That we want to have $1 million house, or we want to have this, we want to have that, right? So all of that kind of leads us on a path of things where we start liking, disliking. We build up something where somebody says something to us and we feel very insulted, or if somebody says nice to us, it goes right to our head. So all of that in this state of who am I that we are going to see is not going to be impactful. So what does that mean? When it is not impactful, now, we will see that that is the state of godhood in a way, right? So like sun shines on the planet, regardless of if you're an evil person or a good person, right? So that's the sense of godhood, right? In a way. So in the very first verse, he says that Krishna says that, what I am delivering in this now is the deepest wisdom, deepest of all the knowledges, deepest of all the sciences. So in a sense, what some people say is that, Hinduism, the highest knowledge in Hinduism is in Upanishads. And long time ago, we covered the Kathopanishad, if you remember. That is one of like hundreds of them, actually. And then Bhagavad Gita is supposed to be the essence of this highest knowledge in a way. And what we are going to talk about today, chapter 15, is sort of the highest amongst all of the chapters in a way. Like he gives the most important information here in chapter 15. But unfortunately, it's going to be a bit dull and stuff because one has to go through this, right? Yeah, sometimes that's the problem in this kind of meetup is like, how do you have that continuity? But hopefully this intrigues you guys enough, not so much because you guys want to become a Hindu, but more because I think a lot of the items here have nothing to do with Hinduism. They all have to do with how do we live our life in this world of chaos, right? So hopefully it gives you some interest in looking at this a bit more deeper on your own time. Obviously, a lot of this has to be on your own time. Nobody is going to give you this knowledge. I'm here to talk, but there's no way I'm going to give you this knowledge. So the journey is to that inner voice, right? This I that is being talked about here is that inner voice. Most of the time, we are far away from that inner voice, right? We are very close to a certain I that we think is the I. And that I, if you noticed, is different when we are talking to our mom, is different when we are talking to our colleague, is different when we are talking to a friend. And it's different when you're alone, or you're sad or happy, ecstatic, all that. So there's we are confused with a state of many eyes going on in our head, and we covered this a long time ago. And each of those eyes tend to be very limited. Limited because we keep morphing our eyes as the situation changes. You know, you like something, you dislike something, you show anger, you show fear, and all of that. And then there is this infinite I, if you will, you know, the inner voice. Inner voice, the claim in Gita is that inner voice of any of us, all of us, is the same. So there is a unique way to approach the world, and that is the same no matter what kind of a human being you are. You're in America, France, or India, or Africa, it doesn't really matter. So we have all the same basic needs, and that in that sense, it is a global inner voice, if you will, or universal inner voice, or infinite I. Or is there something that is even beyond this understanding, right? And that is what we will look at. So the first 6th chapter is, about us or you. If the book is addressing to you, when you're reading, it's about you, in the sense like, how do you live in this world, understanding me or seeking me, myself? Like, how do I deal with the world, my daily actions? And when I am going through dejection, there is a concept about surrender. Surrender to what? Surrender to our, where we kind of feel like, okay, I can't solve this problem with rationality and logic. Then you are open to listening, not quite listening to Hinduism or anything like that, or anybody else, but listening to that inner voice. So inner voice, your inner voice might be muted. So when you're listening to somebody else, you're willing to get that wisdom that you deserve at that point. And this curiosity comes to you for liberation. Liberation means where these desires are not pulling you into the world. And that state, you can be listening to this Gita session as a time pass, as an entertainment. I mean, we do that all the time, right? Philosophy can be an entertainment. So we talked about that last time. So it could be that. But when you come to that real situation in life, that becomes a true curiosity at that point, right? So it's not limited to like, oh, I read Gita too, and yes, done. Let's move on to the next thing, right? So it's not about that. And it impacts us somehow with our every daily action. And the action is not about fixing the other people, but oneself, right? And then true questions start coming out of your mind, yeah? Versus if you're depressed, like, oh, how do I fix this other person who's hurting me and they're making me sad? That person is crazy, blah, 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 right? Instead, you start looking at it a little more holistically, if you will, and a bit more steady mind. The questions that are being asked are the right questions, not about the other person, but about self. And we talked about Krishnamurti like a few sessions ago. He calls this state as cleansing the consciousness. Our consciousness is filled with jealousy, hatred, love, attachment, family roles, this and that, right? So it's a muddle of a lot of things. And the idea is to remove all of that, right? So our consciousness, meaning our awareness, is clear of any biases. So the first 6th chapter kind of helps you deal with this transactional world in a way where you are unbiased at any situation. That is that who am I? And the next 6 chapters, what they talk about is there's a lot of unknowns. We can deal with knowns with the real world, but there's a lot of unknowns. And we tend to call it as that, right? Something that you are not. So that can be God, that can be something unknown, all of that, right? So what is that, right? So seeking that. So it's as if it is something outside me. And that outside me, we tend to bundle that with the name like God. So there were a variety of things that we covered on this one. Like in chapter 8, there was like, and by the way, like there will be review session coming up. So I'm not going to spend way too much time on this, but just to give you a rough idea, this is about like focusing on that one thing and then identifying that is all one, and everybody out there is one. So that is effectively the notion of bhakta, meaning bringing everything together. And meaning oneness, right? And the bhakti is focused here, devotion is focused on this one. And then finally, there is that and you. And so this isness, right? So that is you, or that you are. So here we are trying to understand this existence, this isness, right? Why do I feel me, and why does it feel like there's something out there, right? So there's a lot of this unknown. And what is this isness? Isness about me, and then isness about that. So how do I explain that, right? So in chapter 13, we covered how I can differentiate between what I know and what is the knower. Like I know something. What is this something? It can be my thoughts, my intellect, my senses. I can sense the heat. I can see the pictures, and then the objects in the world. So anything, all of that where I can say, I see this, that this is all outside of me, the so-called me, that's the knower. And I'm not this field is what we talked about in chapter 14. So what is this field out there and all this chaos that is happening around, be it in our mind or be it in the world? That we covered in 14, and that chaos is what is these three gunas, right? Three properties, and they can drag us into the nature or the prakriti or this outside world, or our mind. But then the idea of knower is that you are not that which drags us into this world, and then we get pulled into, right? So I am the knower, right? So this knower, who is the foundation of everything, is what we are going to talk about, right? And that is the who am I in reality. So roughly that. Now, when a world is being mentioned here, right? So there is obviously the physical world, and then there is the psychological world. Like when you see a house, when you are listening to me, you don't really know me. You know my video, my voice. There are other people in the room. So there is as if there is a image of that in your head, through your eyes, through your ears, through all of these senses. So it builds up your psychological space for what you are sensing out there. So whatever out there filters through the senses and is morphed in our brain through our inner biases, inner past memories, and all of that, right? So that is your psychological world. And then there is the essence of it, in the sense that that psychological world, the way you see it, what is giving that rise to? Like, it could be a very depressing world, it could be an ecstatic world, it could be a world of racism, it could be a world of whatnot, whatever, right? So all of that comes from a root cause somewhere, right? So the world that we see is a bit skewed from our perspective. So the physical world is by itself whatever it is. You can't really fix it, nor it is going to be changed, and how it came about, that's not the purpose of this whole philosophy, or in general about religion, I think. They are trying to address more the psychological world that gets built around this and impacts the human journey, right? Individual human journey. So what is the world? The Indian term for that is Jagat. What is this life, so-called living thing? You see the flowers blooming, ants moving, we talking, you understanding, right? All of that is this life. What is that? What does, how do you explain that? What is supporting all this? Is there a higher power, God, or the, again, you can call that as the elan vital or essence and all of that stuff, right? And a lot of that is unknown, right? So we are trying to explain that. And we try to bucketize that as God, some of us, right? There's so much life around us, and that is reality, right? And in Sanskrit it would be called as the Satya, meaning that is indeed the truth. By life here, what I mean is not just the physical form and all of that stuff that you see out there, but the element of growth, the element of destruction, the element that makes us happy, makes us sad, the consciousness and all of that, right? So there is something underneath all of these forms that blind us, right? And that is the truth. But we seem lost in the forms, colors, shapes, names, roles, the falsehood, right? And that is called as mithya. So it's about the trajectory within, this psychological world, our own our only reality, right? I mean, the way you are interpreting Gita might be different than the other person who is interpreting Gita. Might not even be related to what I am saying. Whatever I'm saying might get filtered based on what your inner psychological world has been conditioned to be. So 1 to 6, as we saw, it has to do with clean up your act, erase oneself. And what is interesting here is from 1 till 12, there's a lot of question answers that happen. So Arjuna is asking the question and Krishna is responding, right? So it's as if I am questioning my inner voice. The inner voice says something, I'm in an argumentative state, and that calms down eventually, the argumentation, and the rationality, the logic, because rationality and logic is all based on what we have learned in education, in schools, or the society, and all of that. So it's very conditioned, might not be true, but we think that that is very true. And so at some point, in some crises, that kind of calms down. And then in that problem, if you're really aware, then the inner voice starts speaking. And then in this 14 and 15, if you notice, there were no questions asked by Arjuna. The whole chapter kind of starts with Blessed Lord speaks. So it's as if the inner voice is speaking. Now, this Blessed Lord that we have talked about earlier, here we actually will have an answer to that. This kind of makes it seem very religious and all of that stuff, but it is not. So yeah, that's that. So, okay. So like I said already, all about this. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip this. All right. So the very first statement in the book kind of calls this whole world as an upside down tree. I'm not sure how many of you guys have read chapter 15. Yeah, okay. Or one person, Jason. Anybody else has read the chapter 15 at all? Probably not.
Yep, I have.
Yeah, you have? Okay, great. Okay, so if you remember, now the analogy that is being drawn is about the tree, upside down tree. There was a chariot analogy a while ago, right? A long time ago, a few chapters ago. But now it is about the tree. So roots they tend to be beyond the space and time. We don't know where all of this comes from, entire universe, original cause, or there is a theory about like, okay, it's consciousness, right? At least we are only talking about our psychological world at this point, right? We're not talking about the physical world, but this can extend there, but we're not going to go there today. Just about the reality is out there. There is a plant, there's a tree, there's a house, there are houses, there's a window, there's a laptop, I'm presenting something, all of that is there. But there is a world within us, and there is a root cause for that world within us. And the root cause for that world tends to be the fact that we are conscious. I'm conscious, so I can build up this inner world. And that is the root, right? And then there are the branches. And the branches, they're now in this situation. The roots are up there. The branches are going downwards. It's an upside down tree. And those branches are, whatever we, this consciousness allows us to, think of, we are thinking, and we're taking action using our senses and dealing with the objects in the world. And there is certain results that happen, and we are in this cycle continuously, right? And there is ton and ton of branches that are growing. And this whole tree is, the branches come and go, the leaves fall off, the branches fall off, new branches come along. So this is one of those tree that lives forever, right? It is, you can't really get rid of it. So that's the idea. And it tends to be so overwhelming, this whole result, sense, action, objects, you forget the original cause. It hides where we came from, or the roots. Now, in this result, sense, action, what we are trying to do is we are constantly looking for stability. We do something and we say, whatever my few $1 million I have, or whatever, needs to stay the same. And I need to live like this forever. I need to be 16 forever, or whatever, right? And that kind of expectation of desire for constancy always, if you remember, leads to sorrow. Because we are aging, our money is going to dwindle, houses are going to fall apart, there will be an earthquake or whatnot, right? Anything. And in this struggle for constancy, the roots are forgotten. The remedy here we are going to talk about is we need to chop this tree off, this particular tree that has overgrown. And again, we are talking about in the psychological space, right? Don't be going out chopping any trees. But one needs to own this tree first, right? So how do you chop a tree? You chop because, you got to own it first. And this is a key principle here that we're going to talk about, how we can understand this tree. Once we understand, that understanding itself will be enough for the tree to just vanish on its own accord. That's the chopping part. Now these trees are going to have leaves. So in that particular line, it says that leaves are as if they are the collected knowledge, like Vedas, Vedanta is what they say. But it can be anything: Bible, Quran, our science books, physics, everything, right? Certainly makes our world very beautiful. There's great narratives in any religious text that should evoke love in us. They're very nourishing for us. When we listen to this kind of talk, feels great. When we learn something that we like physics, math, and all that stuff, biology and all of that, gives us education. We can be productive on this planet and all of that good stuff, right? So that's the leaves. Now notice that there's roots, there's senses, and that forms the tree. And leaves, the knowledge has been, or collection of knowledge has been kept far away from the root. So one would think that it is up there, right, along the side of God, but there's all these senses in the middle that are even more closer to God, if you will, or the original cause. And the knowledge is much farther. So how do you interpret that, right? Sometimes what happens is we look at this knowledge that we are collecting. We tend to get lost in that collection of knowledge, right? So what that means is we are not able to work on our senses. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to know why the Gita said chop down the tree. Why you want to chop the tree?
Chop down tree. I'll get there. So this tree is about a collection of if you notice, the tree comes from consciousness. Because we are conscious, we are using our senses to act in this world in a certain way, and that action tends to come from desires. And we are doing all kinds of bad things potentially and suffering, constantly suffering. It is hard to find somebody who is absolutely satisfied, except for maybe Buddha and Jesus Christ and a lot of these few people, right? So that's why we got to chop the tree. Now, chop we'll see all of that about that. So hold on to that thought. So we can get lost sometimes on these leaves. They are very enticing. And then there are these inner desires that we kind of cloak them with this knowledge. And we don't really work on this whole result, action, desire, things that are happening at the level of branches. And, sometimes this collecting of knowledge can be such a hard shell that a lot of this anger desires will start burying even more deeper. And they are now getting ready to explode. So that's why these leaves, as nice and nourishing and beautiful they look, one has to take them with a grain of salt, in a way. So the way to reach to the original cause, I mean, ultimately you want to reduce these actions and desires and all of that stuff, is only through the main trunk, going through the senses and feelings and all of that stuff, right? Analyze individual actions, feelings, our senses, mind, and through the main trunk. Now, what happens is we're going to see how we don't usually take that route. And what is the supreme wisdom, he calls it, right? He says that seeing this unchanging original source, the original source consciousness, your consciousness, my consciousness, all of it is fixed in the sense it's constant. I mean, you are as much aware as I am aware, right? Within the changing world, your changing world is different than my changing world, and even that my changing world is constantly changing, moment to moment, day to day, day after day. And that's the wisdom, understanding this. One sees the root in the branches, right? Because ultimately everything is coming from that root, meaning that I can appreciate. I look at you, maybe I see a woman, maybe I see a white person, or and then maybe some racist thoughts come to my mind and all of that stuff, right? So that is all superficial, but I could also see that you came from the same root, which is your pleasure, pain, jealousy, envy, anger. All of that is because you're a conscious person. I'm a conscious person. So I can see that consciousness within you, meaning that whatever you are capable of, I'm capable of. And there is that notion of namaste, right? In the Indian thing, I can see the God in you, and I have the same God in me, right? Knowing this particular state is the ultimate human purpose. And then everything else follows after that. That's the point. It doesn't mean that you got to stop acting or doing anything in the world. But the problem is when we just do without this sense of oneness, we create so much chaos in the world. I mean, we just look around, right? We are destroying the planet and destroying each other. Right. So ultimately, once I have that connection with people, or even animals, or things, or even something that is not alive, that connection at that level of consciousness, automatically love and compassion and non-duality becomes part of you. So what we have to our disposal is the leaves, right? There is the knowledge. You could stay stuck up in the branches here, but within the space of knowledge, right? So these actions and duty and, a notion of controlling oneself, and then seeing one in all, right? So that is all coming from vast number of human beings' experience over so many centuries and generations, right? And that is something that we could leverage to our benefit for this lifetime. And wisdom, ultimately, darshan is the word for that, where you are now, the God, or you can see the God, not in a human form or such, but in every human you start seeing it within yourself. And darshan also happens to be the Indian name for philosophy in general. Philosophy in Western culture means love of knowledge. Here, it just means seeing oneself, understanding oneself, which is also to some extent philosophy is doing, right? Philosophy is trying to understand the human condition, but the philosophy tends to put you outside in the sense that you're analyzing something. Here, in the Asian ways of dealing with things, you're analyzing yourself is the lab, right? You're not looking at other people. You're just going within yourself, right? My desires, my world, my psychological world, and all of that, right? So that's a sort of a unique distinction. And then now we talk about, after the tree, let's talk about a little bit about the branches and the foliage. So we saw that the branches are the senses, and they tend to go up and down. And one way to look at this is we humans are unique on this planet in the sense that we have the mind, we have an ability to smile, laugh, get sad. And, we can create trains of thoughts and actions come out of it and all that. So that's a very unique ability that, we can act, right? Animals just do things. They don't like acting means that there is a little bit of a thought involved behind that doing. So there is a notion of mind that we have, and that one of the gunas, I said that there's these 3 gunas acting on this planet. One of them is rajas, meaning that continuous action, right? So there's momentum there. And these actions can lead us up, mental state, down in the mental state, right? So you could do horrible things or you could do nice things. And human evolution is these gunas, these 3 elements that build our psyche. We want to control their direction, right? So that so moving to levels upwards or downwards as you're doing these actions. Now, one could say, I'm just going to stay here, right? The circle meaning I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep doing these actions because I like this state, like being human. That's it. I'm just going to stay here. There might be some kind of a charity type of a feeling that comes to us, and then we start going up here in this direction. That is the sattva feeling, leads up to higher life form, right? Now this also, trying to go up can be in 2 directions. One is trying to go out there and helping somebody else, fixing other people's problems while the house might be burning, right? That can be a quality of leading a higher life form. We try to fix Iraq while there is so many issues going on here, right? So that kind of a notion, right? So that is bad. That is not good because that is your house is burning. You should be fixing the house. So the inner, the sattva higher life form can also be moving inwards. And that is most desirable outcome, right? So the actions that you do with this human actions, it should help us go inwards. Tamas is something that leads us to lower life form, right? We start doing horrible things on the planet, and there's multiple life forms. There's the concept of rebirth. Nobody knows that for true, but the idea of rebirth is for you to think about your state today, right? So Rajas is here as a human doing the action, right? So you are not moving, you're just right there. Although you are very active, but you like this human state. Inwards is actions now become actionless. And this is what we covered in chapter 1 through 6. There's no doership, right? I am doing this is not there. You're doing for, you tend to say, I'm doing this for God, or I'm doing this for the larger good. I'm just a mini me, right? I'm not taking any credit for this, because obviously when we do something nice, it's not just you that is involved, right? I mean, there's a lot of other generations of people that have brought to this stage where you were able to build something. So taking credit for that in chapter 3, Krishna calls that is idiocy, because you are forgetting how many generations have gone through so much pain for you to come to this point to even like maybe speak English or read, all of that you're discounting. So the idea is how you can stay in this world and then start liberating yourself or chopping that tree down, right? So there are four directions. Going inwards is the direction that one should prefer. Now, this is a key concept here, right? So foliage. So there's a certain kinds of these mini branches and things that are tender, that start growing on the tree. They look very pretty when they're young. And those are supposed to depict the objects to our senses, right? So they're very enticing. And these are the ones that tend to drive our actions. Either we go upwards or downwards. And when we are trying to expect some pleasure out of an action all the time, and we are enjoying it, that is called as bhoga. Bhog is opposite of yoga, for example. So we'll cover that. Now, foliage grows stronger. How does that foliage grow stronger? You know, that little thing that has come out of the branch. Our actions, our desires feed more of the same action. You know, we really like that. 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And then we start finding pleasure in that action, more of it. So what happens is, you know, on some trees, you will see that there is a side trunk that goes all the way down to the root, right? So that foliage now becomes sort of like the main trunk, even though it is not the main trunk, which what it is trying to say is we mistake this kind of action that leads us to success, happiness. That happiness we mistake to this real bliss of being with ourself, within ourselves, or walking through the main trunk to the root, because the side trunk is also going to go touch the root. And so it is also sort of sucking the same source of bliss in a way, but you're not getting it from the right place. You're just getting it from the wrong place, right? So we mistake our happiness to a state of closeness to God, which it is not, right? And yeah, so what is the root cause of this action feeding more actions, right? We are a thinking being, mind. So when our thoughts go outwards, we are participating in the craziness, right? So that drives more actions and all of that stuff. But these thoughts can also be inward focused and peaceful, godly bliss, right? So in a way, so again, I'll keep mentioning God, but that has nothing to do with Hindu God or any God for that matter. But this is just a sort of a philosophical, I would say, something we put in the bucket of unknown, or that ultimate peace, or the bliss and all that stuff, right? So when the thoughts are pulling us out into the world, we are lost in the thoughts, the whirlpool of the world. This is that tree, right? That huge tree in the foliage that has grown, and that is that state. You are lost in that tree. And then everything starts impacting you, up, down, in, sort of makes sense for you, good, bad, evil actions, and win, loss, birth, death, change, stability becomes your concern. All of that is you're participating in all of that. It's affecting you a lot. Outward focus, this body and me, that you, beyond us, right? So we start drawing these boundaries. I am here, this body or this house. That is you, this other house. And then there's something beyond us. You better fear that, right? So there's this element of fear that becomes sort of part and parcel of our lives. The root of this I, of this world, is in I. So this is all of these things that we feel, ups and downs, wanting to go inwards, as we talked about earlier, the good, bad action, all of this, right? The psychological world. What is the root of this? It's the I. It's our ego, our desires. And, like we said earlier, the fundamental is consciousness, but we have forgotten that, in the sense that we are focusing on this I, the ego that has been built at this point. And then it creates this tree in a way, right? So it wants you to stay in this tree, but it forgets where it came from, the root, which is the consciousness. So this little I is nourishing the psychological world, but effectively, the root is also creating and nourishing the psychological world. So this tree. Now we cannot run away from these thoughts. I mean, thoughts are always going to be there. The idea here is that how can I get rid of this chaotic tree? There is a need to chop this tree. Can be forced, we can always force this, right? There are these meditation rituals, or we go to prayer on Sundays, and there's all these things, right? For those few minutes, it's good that we go do that. At least during that time, we are not participating in the chaos in the world, and we are not hurting anybody. But once that is done, we go out and, we are that same angry self, fearful of others and all of that stuff, right? So this forced thing doesn't stay with us for too long. So this mind and thought can be the same element or the instrument for us to kind of get rid of this tree. So this mind and thought will make us feel lost in the tree, but also can help us get rid of the tree and go to the root. And that is that inward focus, right? And so it is always good, right? And when you are looking at a psychological problem, one question you can ask is, why am I like this? And it is because of this, that, and the other, right? So now a world has been built. Now you can also say, what was my role in it? Now that sudden change of focus, what was my role in it? You start seeing other side of the world. And the world that initially was pictured, where you said that is the thing that is causing this, now that will start having a little colors, shades. And that focus, inward focus, you can also think of that as dhyana yoga, that is mentioned at times. There's more to it, but I'm just trying to draw an analogy here. And then, dedicating everything, you still have to do your actions, right? Work that you're doing on the planet, so that you can dedicate everything to God, or in this case, if you don't believe in God, which is fine, I don't. The idea is that you can dedicate your action to that inner growth, if you will, where you're not doing it for the satisfaction of the desire or anything like that, right? So, and it is not resulting into anger. And that's the criteria. Like, if something is making you angry, something is making you afraid, then you are acting in sin. So that is the sin. I mean, even if you're not damaging the planet, you've already damaged in your head, right? And that is, that karma that you have created for yourself, where you are afraid, yet you did that thing, that internal karma is going to come get you. And that's that cycle of karma, right? You're creating that yourself. Nobody is creating that for you. And then you can go to walk towards the bhakti yoga, where, you start seeing God in everything. You're dedicating something, to the God at that point, but now everything becomes the God. And seeing this all, this tree for what it is the Gyan Yoga. That is this chapter, right? Or this section. Now, how do we chop off this tree? What is the axe that we need to use? The axe here, in the line, it mentions detachment. I don't like the term detachment. It's better to call it non-attachment, and we'll see why. So attachment, if you remember chapter 14, when we talked about Jiddu Krishnamurti, who is by far the highest saint when it comes to explaining what Gyan Yoga is. His whole philosophy was based around knowledge. That's it. No rituals, no guru, no yoga, nothing of that sort. If you know it, you can stop it. That was his point. And he says that attachment, if you notice when you are in love with somebody, that love sometimes gets morphed into jealousy. You might worry that you're going to lose that person. And you sometimes indeed lose that person, and then you suffer, right? that is the cycle that we tend to call as love. Be it with our kids, be it with a girlfriend, boyfriend, be it with a job, or be it with whatever, house or whatever. So that whole cycle of attachment comes from, and it also triggers the more desires and more all of that, right? So, and if you go back to how this comes about, you are building it off of some broken memories. All the memories are broken in a way, right? They're not true representation, but you tend to filter things out based on whatever you need at that moment, right? So these things always are broken in the sense, our love is sort of not 100%. There is a tinge of jealousy there, there's all of that stuff, fear. So this attachment, when you look at it this way and you say, aha, that makes sense. So attachment is bad, right? So I want to get rid of attachment because guess what? I want to be happy. So are we doing this to gain something? That's the question that we have to ask when we are doing. This was covered in chapter 2.47, where Krishna says that you do everything, don't worry about the results, and you should never not do anything, right? So inaction is not good. Action is good, but results are not in your hand. So that thing sort of comes back here in the sense that we can ask ourselves when we are doing maybe this practice or whatnot, anything that we are doing, are we trying to gain something out of it? Now that suddenly is the desire, right? And what that does is not that it is going to cause any like major damage. I mean, it will lead you down this path of attachment or repulsion. Repulsion is just no attachment, right? And you will never reach to the core or the essence or that wisdom that is being talked about here, right? So if you're learning something, if you're trying to learn physics, for example, because you are going to get this amazing job, so that desire is that amazing job. When that happens, you have taken away that opportunity to really learn physics, right? That's the point. So you cannot ever get to the core of that thing if you don't really enjoy the process immediately now without worrying about the what you're going to achieve. Now, the cool thing about this is that the objects, the mind or the intellect, that whole thing, all those things in the field, we think that we are attached to a person or this chair or the house or the car and all of that stuff. Well, those cars are not attaching to you, right? We think that you're attached to them, but they are not really attaching to you. So like, where is this attachment coming from? So the point is that you think that, oh no, it is coming from, well, I need that. So I need that. So because I think that that is really nice. I think that that is really nice. So I feel, and then it turns out to be a feeling. So we're going to spend some time on that right here, right? So this mere feeling, the thing about feeling is it is going to come and go. So that coming and going, we want to always keep it constant. Whenever it is trying to go, we want to make it coming, right? So we want to keep that feeling constant for a long time. We cannot do that. And that also ends up becoming a problem. So immediately understanding that when a feeling is coming, it's a feeling that is going to go away. Otherwise, you get lost into the emotions of it. And that is, again, getting entangled in the world, in the tree. Then we say, okay, wow, that sounds great, as I mentioned earlier, right? Oh, how about I detach from everything? We understand the downsides of attachment. Well, that's just the opposite direction. And it is also a feeling. So in that sense, it's also fake, that detachment, right? And it can make you isolated. And it can just, people will start not liking you. You won't have any interaction with people at that point. And so, we tend to think that a spiritual person means a person who is detached and who has renounced this world and all of that stuff, right? So that is that outward thing that, we think that's what Buddha is, or that's what Jesus Christ was or whatnot, right? So we associate these outward qualities to spirituality, but those outward qualities are not the goal. Even that's what Arjuna says in chapter 1, right? He says, I would much rather be a monk. I would rather just go to the jungle, forest, than, do this horrible sin here. Krishna tells him that you're a warrior at heart. So even if you took up these alms and started begging on the street, or you go to the mountain, all that stuff, this inner quality of you being a warrior, you're going to create new wars out there, and that's not good. You got to fight this war here. So this outward quality of detachment and renunciation is also not the goal. There is a notion of true renunciation. So what is non-attachment, right? So non-attachment is letting those thoughts and those desires dissolve, meaning once you understand, you take that experience that you're going through right now. Oh, I missed something so badly that I'm crying and all of that stuff. How did that come about? You go backwards, right? I maybe suffocated the person and all that stuff, right? And then this person was looking for freedom from that. And, maybe there was something too possessive in my love to this person, right? So once we know that, that is enough for us to realize, now, okay, I need to set that person free, and that person can do whatever they want to do. And the next time we are going to go around, in some other situation, we are not going to have that same thing. So knowledge is sometimes confused. Oh, what is going on here? So knowledge is confused to be blind collection. We talked about that, right? So in chapter 14, we think that if we read more, all of that is the best thing to do. But that is also ephemeral, right? It only stays with us for those few minutes when we are reading and listening. This is the state of lost in leaves. Similarly, sacredness is also confused to be blind devotion or rituals, the outwardly appearance, right? And it's fine, for those few minutes, you're not hurting anybody. But you're again lost in leaves. You're not able to get to the root of all of this. Getting there does need us to be sacred, meaning this knowledge is not something that you're going to throw out, right? Or the notion of what makes things sacred is also something that you're not supposed to get rid of. But that needs to be used or channeled in the right direction. Start with surrender to higher self in everyone, right? So this blind devotion that you are doing, you're not doing to gain something, but you're humbling yourself, and also trying to see God in this inanimate object. If you're praying to a little statue, but that is supposed to help us think of an animated object, meaning any other live person who obviously has more qualities than that little piece of rock. That little piece of rock is helping you in your mental state, but here is a higher life form. So we should be able to see the same God that you are able to see in this piece of rock in that higher form. So that is what that blind devotion is supposed to make you aware of. Initially, you start there, but you want to get there. Similarly, as you're reading more books, right? Reading more books, collecting more knowledge, physics, math, or whatnot, multiple philosophies and all of that stuff, right? It needs to bring about in you a little sense of surrender, in the sense that, wow, I don't understand this, but this is amazing. And it should bring you that state of happiness, and maybe some of it trickles down through your nervous system, right, to help you. So true renunciation is renunciation of desires. But you might start out with that, right? So let's say you're praying and you say that, oh, I'm doing this because this prayer is going to help me win $1 million or whatnot, right? So that while that happens, right, immediately you need to like wipe that out from your mind. So that is you coming in and renouncing that need for $1 million. So that is something that you would start out with, knowing, internalizing, seeing clinically, not judging the attachment and its effects. And then, hopefully the wisdom comes to you, right? Meaning that $1 million is not going to affect you anymore. Notice that, we start to force the sacredness, or we start the forcing of knowledge collection, but then it leads to a proper knowledge collection in a way, right? So you start sifting through these things and utilizing it to gain that wisdom. So the state at the beginning and the end tends to be the same thing. And that is the beauty of that Bhakti Yoga, chapter 7 through 12. Some Swamis say that, that's the ultimate thing, even though some people think that Jnana Yoga is the ultimate thing. But the beauty of Bhakti is that the ego starts out vanished and it stays vanished. Ultimately, that's the end goal. In Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga, what happens is you're still there. You are still there trying to fix that action. In Jnana Yoga, you are learning. So it can be ego feeding in a way. But bhakti is immediately like, wiping out yourself. So in that sense, chapter 7 through 12 tend to be quite useful. And that could be also, you will see a lot of movements in India over generations that might externally feel very like paganistic or ritualistic and all of that stuff. But there's something else going on there psychologically, right? Where they're humbling themselves in front of this power that they don't understand. Sufism, same thing, right? In the Muslim world. So there is efforts needed, right, to get to that stage. There's listening, internalizing, searching for yourself, cleansing action, becoming ultimately, the test is, if an insult comes your way, will that hurt you? Or, if somebody praises you, is that going to boost your ego? So anyway, so I think what Krishnamurti said is that that is that other thing that we talked about in chapter 14, which is very similar to what Krishna effectively says here. Sacred follows after the mind becomes holistic, meaning that it can wholesomely look at a situation without any biases. Not holistic doesn't mean anything to do with God or anything like that, but just wholesomely, meaning you're not biased. And that is your wisdom or the knowledge of self. So chopping this tree, once you got that axe of detachment, what is the criteria that the tree is gone? The peace, a certain amount of peace. So like right now, as we are talking about these concepts, that while even just listening to those concepts, if you really look within, there must be calming down effect of some of the traumas that might be going on in your life. I mean, I certainly experienced that, and I'm going through a lot of things in my life. And so it's almost kind of like, you're walking in this desert and you kind of get a whiff of some spring water spring. And so that there's an oasis somewhere nearby and I can go drink some water, right, to quench my thirst. So it's the same effect, right? That analogy is used in many different places. So we talked about this. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff. Okay, so the process that he talks about, he gives us a process here of that chopping of the tree. Nirmana Moha, this is the Sanskrit verse for that. Without delusion of vanity, that's where you start, right? Jitasanga dosa, meaning win over disease of attachment. So dosha means attachment, disease. And jit means winning. Sangha has to do with attachment, right? So you want to win over this disease of attachment. Dwell on self or God constantly, right? That needs to be the eternal thing in your mind. What that means is not like thinking about Jesus or thinking about somebody. while that might help for a short while, ultimately, every action that you do, it needs to bring you back to your inner self. I mean, that's what that means, right? This, ultimately, you want to get free from desire to enjoy, right? That desire to enjoy is the cause for all your sufferings, in fact. And then free from dualities. What that means is, like, if somebody says you got to be honest, well, maybe you have been dishonest. Now you have jumped to that other state. Attachment, you jump to detachment. Or something happens, you're happy, unhappy. And so these kind of dualities, whatever is causing that impact of these two states in your mind, can be so many different reasons. You should immediately say, okay, my mind is sad, my mind is happy. That's it, right? So you are something different from that mental state. So free from dualities. Sukha dukkha sanjay means somebody who is not just collecting pleasure, which is, this desire to enjoy, but you are winning over that complete state of pleasure or pain, right? You're beyond those two things. If pleasure happens, you're okay. If pain happens, you're okay. And Gachanti Amuda means attains to that undiluted state. Remember, the whole dejection, Arjuna starts with a state of delusion. And when we run into these conflicts, existential crises, all of that stuff, that is pointing to a state of delusion, right? Or we might even not know sometimes, this crisis makes you aware of the delusion that you have been in, maybe because of a relationship or whatnot, right? Now, that should not lead you to hate that person or do something horrible, but you want to go through this process and question yourself, turn the focus on yourself, and attain that undiluted state. Means you're not going to be deluded again from that, right? And that is reaching the root of the tree. So this I'm not going to cover. I mean, maybe we can do that some other time, but we'll just skip over that for now. Okay. And then now we're going to talk about, okay, so that's the process, but the next few verses, he goes into, let me explain you about life form. What is this life? What does that even mean? So life is effectively, if you remember, we talked about those 7 chakras, right? The mental state, the bottom Muladhara, Swadhisthana, and all of that, right? So there's this bottom 3 chakras, which have to do with our body focusedness, mind focusedness, desire focusedness, all of that. And then at some point you get tired of that and you come to a state where this existential crisis has happened and you start questioning all your past desires, all your love for somebody, all your hatred for somebody. All of that comes to this state, which is called as the Anahat chakra. This is the heart chakra, if you will, right? This is where now you're open to listen to somebody, because your rationality has explained to you that this person is always going to help you, yet something bad has happened. Now, rather than blaming that person, you're now questioning yourself. And now you are ready to go up, right? But those bottom 3 chakras, it is as if you have forgotten that you are so much more than this person that you think you are. That limitedness, and that limitedness comes from us getting dragged into that tree, the prakriti, right? So that is that state is called as the jiva. And he says that every being is eternal portion of me who is eternal. And we'll talk about which me he's talking about. So this little consciousness that we feel, I'm conscious and you feel you're conscious and all that, right? He calls it that is a portion of me. And notice that that portion itself is eternal. What that means is that this is really important to understand, because the way I understand this is that this consciousness or this subtlety that we have in us, the so-called mind and heart, not the physical heart, but the heart, the compassion, the fears, the anger, all of that, right? The inner drive, the psychology, and all of that, that is eternal, meaning that that is just something your body will come and go, and those things will sort of stay. Do we know anything that can we prove any of that? No. We do not know how we were born, and we do not know how we will die. I mean, that those two experiences are far from us. What we know is this experience right in the middle of it, right? So we can look at, extrapolate on the left before birth, after death, to help us live better here, so that we are improving the life for everybody else, right? I mean, that's the point of rebirth. Rather than focusing on longevity or second birth and all of that stuff, and what can I do now to hurt that person in my next birth and all of that stuff, right? That is all nonsense, in my opinion. But the idea is you look at this type of a metaphor to help you in this current life. And that what Gita is trying to say is that all your these desires and all of that stuff, if your life comes to end, those desires carry on, and then they find a new body to satisfy those desires. So in that sense, your subtle body is going to relive the whatever you want it to relive, and you will come back to whatever life form that is going to help you enjoy that particular thing, right? Now, if that's your goal, then you do that, right? But ultimately, the goal is to liberate from that rebirth phenomena. So liberation means that in this life form, I look at the futility of these desires and sufferings that I'm going through, and I realize, wow, this is a mess, and this is craziness. And it immediately does something to you. You gain that wisdom, which is what happened to Buddha under that tree when he sat there for what, like 7 days or something, that was his aha moment in a way. So when that aha moment comes to you, you realize, oh, you know what? I'm not going to participate in this, like this worldly cycle of pleasure and pain and all of that stuff, right? Done. And at that point, what happens is your desires have calmed down, and now there is no reason for you to be reborn. Effectively, that is the liberation. So the way you can also think of this is, forget about if we are going to have a second life or not. That's not the point. The point is, within this life, we live so many lives. You were a different person when you were a child, youth, and even like 30, 40, 50. Every day we are somewhat different based on our life's experiences. So that's what we are talking about. This jiva has this notion of continuously he or she is participating in this cycle of birth and death. Okay. So we talked about this, right? So but the key thing is, like, one life to the next life, or even one situation to new situation, right? Everywhere I go, I think I change my situation, but there I am, right? I has not changed. I might fix the whole world and I might create this new world, except I forget to change myself. Then I'm going to create the same world out there, right? We are doing that constantly. We go from desire to desire and we stay scattered. Desire is bhoga, but you can use your senses. You watch those desires. Now you have those senses to focus on the individual. Individual also has some connection to the word indivisible, meaning that you are now this unique unity, one. Because as I said earlier, we are many eyes walking around in this world, right? In fact, whatever number of people you meet, you can multiply your eye that many times. You're all of those people. Because when you're talking with this other person, you already have a pre-notion of that person. You have that image of that person in your mind. So you're talking to that person in your mind. Sometimes that other person might feel lost as to what you're saying. But that's the point, right? So we are carrying this whole world within us in a way. So So how can we use our senses to go through that main trunk of the tree and be that unique eye, the unity, and reach to the root? And that is going from bhoga to yoga. Now you're integrated. Yoga also means coming together. Yoga means like bringing something together. Yoga in our culture here means balance and all of that stuff, all those exercises. But yeah, in reality, it means that you come together with this higher power, the inner self. Okay, so we talked about this, I think. Yeah, we talked about how the rebirth happens. So there's a couple of verses that talk about it. The subtle body kind of gives the shape to the next birth. So let's say you die with ton of desire for chicken or something, right? It's a joke. So I don't know if that happens, but yeah, you might get born as a chicken apparently. So so the wisdom is seeing this circle of life and death, right, that you're stuck in. So there's a word like yogi, you might have heard of that, and then there's a word that a lot of Hindus will understand, bhogi, who is always stuck in the pleasure or this world, right? The yogi is always trying to move inwards, and grow the heart filled with Parm-atma. We're going to talk about that. That is that inner self, and you just be, meaning that whatever you are trying to see out there, you want to be that first. So if you want to see God, make yourself godly. That's what that means. Let's say you want to see the God, that's your goal, or you want to make that $1 million, or you want to make friends, or you want to have a loving partnership with somebody. That how do I get there, right? That's the point of this number 11. So there is this concept of Brahman. So there's man. Man means mind. Brahman means cosmic mind. So when your mind has expanded to include everybody, that state effectively is Brahman. Okay, it's not a caste, has nothing to do with caste. Unfortunately, Hindus and Indians messed it up, the whole concept of Gita. So they started breaking that into castes and all of that stuff. Nothing of that sort has been talked about in Gita or any of the Vedas and all that stuff, right? So this was all made up by people controlling other people. So what does that state mean? And a lot of these people, you will see these people who are wearing orange clothes, who they are swamis, and they're like the epitome of this Brahmin. But we focus on those orange clothes and all of that stuff, right? But what happens to these people when they go to that particular realization is sort of like a second birth, dvija. So here you start realizing your duty towards your parents in their old age. So what that means is that, there is this in philosophy, I don't know what it is in Western culture, but a lot of the Asian philosophies, there is this notion of like, it is easy for you to love your child. When a child is cute, baby, they deserve help, and they want nurturing and all of that stuff. So they are innately cute. So the love is so more natural for the parent to love that cute little baby. So there's nothing fancy about that. Nothing marvelous that you love your child. That is natural. Nature is working through you. But as you age, a young person, when they can look up to you, that says something great about that young person, because at old age, you're not as attractive, you're not as this and that, right? So that is a idea of the respect that you show to elders, and that happens to be the concept in India a lot, right? Although there's a lot of other horrible things that happen, but in general, in a good family, or there's a certain reverence that you show to the elder people. That is a very hard thing to do, right? To love a old, decrepit, not very good looking older man or a woman, showing care and all of that stuff. So that is something that is the first thing that they, these Brahmins, when they take that dvija, they wear these three threads, those three threads along their neck depict something. One thread is, I will love old aged people, right? And I will have this selfless attitude towards the society, no greed. I'm not going to be earning money or any of that sort. And my journey is going to be all about gaining that wisdom about self, changing my whole desires and all of that stuff, right? So they are in that state. And that happens to be something that we can leverage for anything in life. Let's say we want to become an expert in math or expert in science or grow in our work, all of that stuff. I mean, this attitude of respecting the older person, or feeling humble, even though your role title might be something else, but in general, feeling humble towards the other person. And also having this selfless attitude towards whatever you're doing, whatever you're called to do. And then whatever you're learning, you are learning with a sense of inward focus. And whatever that does, brings certain amount of concentration in you. And you're not focused on the goal. You're not focused on like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to win $1 million a year. That would be my salary later on. No, that is not selfless, right? So that again, now it's not inward focus, it is outward focus. So this state of Brahmanhood can be leveraged in any part of your endeavor in real life. So there is, to get to the path, there is, to get to the goal, there is a path. But focusing on the fruition or the final thing will distract you. And whatever efforts you put in will be very wasted. So there are 3-4 paths that we have already seen through our journey here, karma yoga. So every action that you do, that is the pathway to desire. Everything that you do in the world is a pathway to desire, fulfilling a desire. How can I cleanse that? If it is desire focused, question it, right? And clean that up immediately. And that is that karma yoga, right? So now you are saying that I'm doing this for the Lord. That is one way to, if you believe in God. But can this action lead me to myself? Forget about the result. Am I doing it for the society's betterment and humbling myself? So the content of our consciousness, the jealousy, envy, rage, anger, all of that stuff needs to be cleansed through those daily actions that we do. Path is directed desire towards a higher self. That is the bhakti yoga. Again, concentration, dedication, devotion for whatever you are trying to do. And then the random chatter in your mind, that are these continuous tendencies towards variety of things. That is again distraction, right? How do you control? And yoga is supposed to help you with that. And even in real life, when you're working on math problem or whatnot, these random thoughts in your mind will distract you from that real thing, right? So the balance, if you exercise and if you do some mindful meditation and all that good stuff, right? That is supposed to bring some calm so that you're focused on whatever you're trying to do. And now at this point, you come to a place where you got the right direction in your life, trying to move inwards. So you have these 3 properties to be actually called as a Brahmin. Otherwise, you are those other 3 levels. One is money-minded, one is action-minded, where he is like getting some satisfaction, mental satisfaction. Money-minded is all about, gathering more wealth. And then there is another one, which is the body-minded. These are the 4th level. And in India, they have put certain tribes in that level, which is horrible. That is not what the books have said at all. But religion has been abused all over the planet, right? And then finally, you're ready, from that Brahmanhood state, you're ready to go into the wisdom thing that you will get the wisdom that you are desiring. And you got to develop the heart for it, right? What that means is that, this has to be something that you really want, meaning not just want, but you have to develop that within your core. And then that is going to be possible out there, right? Hridaya is the Indian word for heart. So there is some etymological thing here. Har is so, you pull out from it. It's kind of like the core, if you will. Hari is also a name for God or Krishna. So there's two ways to look at this, right? One is something out there is going to help me win my goal. Something out there. But this kind of a something out there, even in the concept of God or religion, where they say, God is out there, that has resulted into casteism, breaking up the societies and all of that stuff, right? Religion has done that. Because when you are focused on out there is transactional world. It's all about desires and gains and losses. So that feelings that we talked about, right? It is also very much gain and loss driven, because feeling is based on that object that you are looking at. So that if that object is changed in a slightly different way, now you might get a completely opposite feeling. So you can't really rely on just a mere feeling. So the feeling which that object has evoked within you, so that can be ephemeral, right? It'll come and go. But seeing this God in heart, by heart, what that means is that, you're not constantly chattering about God or this goal that you're trying to achieve, but there's something within you that you are developing that core to get it ready, so to get that thing, that achieve that goal or meet God in a way. So if you notice, right, anything you know only secondhand. The only thing that you really know is I am. I am, you cannot ever deny. Like, even if you deny that, that is I am, right? So I am is the only reality, and that's the knowledge that you know is 100% true. It cannot be falsified, because who is going to falsify that, right? It is up to me to falsify if I exist. When I can say I am, right? There is that kinship or that closeness to this knowledge that I am. So that is that in heart, or the knowing something in heart. So I know that 100%. So anything that I know with that closeness is a good thing. That is going to help you achieve that, right? Whatever you're trying to achieve. So heart filled with love will love anything, right? So you are emanating that. Heart filled with hate is going to hate anything. A heart filled with God will now see God, right? Goal attainment in a way. So if we think about, rather than spreading love, we are collecting love, or we are just logicizing love. We are talking about the logic about love. All our tendencies in our mind, the whatever our thought process is, all oriented towards argumentation. Even though we are talking about love, there's absolutely no love, right? So that's the idea, is like, if you cannot wire all your thoughts and your neurons and your brain and cells and all that stuff in the direction of what you want, be it God or love or whatnot, then you're not part of it. Like, you're not really into it. So then it is pure ignorance acting at that point. So that there is this notion of right eye, so there is a charma chakshu, meaning this leather eye, meaning this eye that I have. I can see the screen right now. You can see me on that Zoom call. All of that is a body seeing a body. I mean, there's 3-4 levels of vision that is going on between us right now. You can see my picture, you can see the slides, but they might be arising certain feelings in your mind, and your intellect might be arguing certain things, right? So all of this is going to happen, but there is a deeper I, right? And that is that deeper I being the developing the heart, where you are not getting biased. So all these argumentation, feelings, thoughts, and this outward shape or form of whatever you're seeing is dropped. and you're just there, no biases. And that is what, we covered in chapter 10, the Vibhuti, where you see something that is so shockingly beautiful or shockingly evil or whatever, right? Your ego is completely shattered at that point, and you're not saying that that is beautiful merely because you might have read it in some book or something, but you feel that immediately, and then that just turns down your ego. Now you're seeing it through your inner eye, effectively. So now you're looking past the limits of the senses. So whatever you see with your body is very limited. And as you go inside now, there's more colors that are getting added to it. Now, when you are just at these levels, right, body, mind, or intellect, you can keep trying, right? But what this means, but we will never see God, has nothing to do with God per se. What I mean is, whatever goal you're trying to reach, you will never get there. If you're always constantly seeing something with doubt, then you're blocking that. Maybe you should try something else, right, at that point. So then the 12 through 15, they have talked about, who can actually see. What are we seeing, right? Searching for that I-ness. Where can I see the address of I-ness, if you will, or that life force? So there are a couple different verses that it goes through. Do you see anything illuminating in the sky, sun, moon? That is I-ness. The spirit in the material world. You see seeds falling off, seeds growing, trees falling off, birds dying, birds getting born, all of that, this life around us, that is your I-ness. The beauty or the ugliness or whatever, right? That is your I-ness. The food, how it degrades, and, the digestion process and eating, you eat it, you taste it, your nourishment you get out of it, all of that, that is your I-ness. Your memory, your thoughts, your wisdom, so-called, all the things that we talked about, you interpreting that is also Godhood. That is I-ness. All these high philosophies that come out of it, the physics and math and, all the different Vedas and Vedanta, all that is there looking for me, he says. They are all striving for that ultimate principle to explain life in a way. And guess what? I am the knower of all that knowledge. Not only am I creating the knowledge to find myself, but I'm also trying to learn from that same thing. I'm also the reason. One is the knower of the Vedas. So effectively, I'm the knower, knowing, known, all of that, right? I am it. Observer is the observed, is what Jiddu Krishnamurti would say. This is a bit more deeper. Maybe we can have another lecture on that. And, we think that I am learning, meaning I, Shashi, am learning, SK, am learning this Gita, and I'm becoming an expert on this, right? No, it's not. So this I, Shashi, has to be removed. So there is this deeper consciousness that is trying to understand consciousness itself, if you will. The root is trying to find the root. The highest philosophy on that, right? The little I to notice, and also all the changes that you notice, the desires, the sadness, the happiness, all of that you call as I is also because of this I-ness, right? So notice how it went from larger perspective, world, body, thoughts, memory, knowledge comes to I, right? All of that is the life force. And effectively, all of that is because of that essence, the Parm-atma, or this unknown force that is making all of this happen. And so he breaks it out into two big categories of I's. One is the enjoyer, one that is being enjoyed, So there was the field and knower that we talked about, changing, unchanging, the tree and the root, that simile, basically, seer and the seen. And he says that there are these two things, but guess what? They all are the same things. So the notion of I supports you. I mean, you don't, at least in my psychological world, you don't exist if I don't exist. If I'm dead, then, you know, you don't exist for me. I can't sense you. Or even that notion of higher power. So you and that in my psychological world exists because I am conscious. I supports you and that. So how can we utilize this, right? So in this, notice that Arjuna is telling Krishna in chapter 1 how fighting the war is going to create all kinds of problems. And look, the scriptures have said this and this and that, you know, he's telling all the wisdom of that. Arjuna's I experience is being narrated by Arjuna to Krishna. Now, when I'm telling you something about my life, that telling itself might not be 100% accurate, right? So it could be biased as I am telling you, then you are interpreting that. So there is this I experience, which I am talking about, which is already filtered, and then you interpreting it has more filters. But there is this I experience that is the truth. Like I know, Arjuna knows at that point that, hey, I've learned this from the books. I don't know for sure, but I'm afraid that this might happen, right? So there is, the fear is real, the conditioning is real, I experience is real. Then Krishna takes him through all these chapters up to chapter 14, all of that stuff, right? Now, Krishna is talking about his holistic experience, I experience, the true I experience, the wisdom experience, right? Now, that too is being narrated by Krishna. So, the real wisdom, you cannot talk about it. You can write epitomes about it. You can write books and all that. That's what Lao Tse says, right? In Tao Te Ching. You can't really talk about real wisdom. It's difficult. So now Krishna is trying to explain that I experience, his own wisdom experience, and in a limited way. And then whatever Arjuna is interpreting, or we are interpreting this with our own biases. So we don't have that. So ultimately, you can read Gita in multiple different ways. It can come from the dejection point of view, chapter 1, whatever Arjuna is saying, hey, look, when this is this, something bad is going to happen if I do this, right? So you can follow along his questions along the way in Gita, and sort of you see like those are your own questions. And then what were the answers, right? So you look at the answers from his perspective, but you can also read it from Krishna's perspective. So when you read Krishna's I statement as if your own statement, you start, like something happens in you, like it starts changing you. And that change in you hopefully is permanent, right? It doesn't stay only for the time that you read the book. That is your I experience now. Has nothing to do with what Krishna has said or what this Gita is. This is your I experience, right? And that is that Purushottama. That is that what is supporting this, all of this is that that ultimate self, the inner self, the higher Purusha, right? And, you know, that is where, you know, from the initial delusion, this is the state of undelusion, if you will. It's as if there are two states of the water, right? Or the ocean, like if you look at it from that point of view, there are the waves, and then there is the ocean. But what is the essence of it? It's water, right? Waves are also filled with water. Ocean is also filled with water. So we talk about mutable, or this little me, that is your waves, if you will, right? Immutable, something that I don't understand, and something that is constant, this firmament and this lordship, if you will, soul or God, and, you know, we don't understand that. That's the ocean, infinite, something more. But all of this is made of water, and that is that Purushottama, right? And that is same in me, same in you, same in everybody. So, you know, if we can connect with that, the desires and all of that should fall off. The delusion will not feel like delusion, right? The deeper form is known. There is the form that you see with your eyes, but you can now start seeing that deeper sameness in everything, be it a plant, tree, animal, dog, all that stuff. In the transactional world, you still have to deal with the differences, right? That's okay. I mean, you're not going to start hugging a tiger, for example, or a bear in the woods, you need to run away from the bear. But there is a certain level of compassion that comes in you. You know, bear is hungry, I get hungry too. And that's what is going on here. Yeah, maybe I'll die in this. Dedicate every feeling towards self, be it an action, voice, sound, thoughts, whatnot. There's this common phrase in Bible, right? Love thy neighbor. Neighbor is which neighbor? Not particular neighbor, all of them. Neighbor is just not in your vicinity, but start from your vicinity, meaning yourself and your family, your friends, neighbors, the whole world. How can you do that? We talked about this, right? You know, we need that heart that is filled with love, not that I love you. I am love, right? That's the thing. And bhakti, devotion, or whatever you're doing, your practice, your spiritual practice, whatever you're doing, should lead us to that state, that heart filled with love state. And whatever wisdom you're collecting, whatever books you're reading, whatever knowledge you're gaining, should lead to a certain amount of spiritual direction that is going to make your heart compassionate. If that's not happening, then whatever you're reading is complete wasted energy. You're wasting this life that has been given to you on doing something that is completely useless. And you are suffering along the way. And that's the state of delusion, right? And that is panditry. You know, you see this, pandit is also an English word, right? On the talking heads on TV. They think that they are wise, but they're not, right? And a lot of these talking heads ultimately start dividing the society. That is how the castes were formed in India. That's not what Gita was saying. They took the superficial, whatever they derived from it, and started wanting to control people. And it corrupts everything when you do this at this state of delusion. So a lot of our solutions today, whatever we create, we don't have this deeper knowledge of, you know, how can we bring a little bit of a compassion in our decision-making process, or compassion towards everything, has resulted into a lot of corrupt society. Corrupt meaning not corruption, but corrupt meaning a broken society. So, you know, you see so many things, all the solutions are so broken. The whole planet just seems like is on fire sometimes. So anyways, yeah, that's chapter 15. Wow, we now have 10 minutes. Amazing.
No, thank you, Sashi. Yeah, I changed. Okay, so let me ask you one question. Okay, I do have a question. So here on the verses 15, right? Okay, I just use this as an example. Verses 14, right?
14.
I enter breathing, creature dwell within the life-giving breath. I am the fire in the stomach which digests all food. Entering into every heart, I give the power to remember and understand it. It is I, again, who take the power away. All the scripture did to me. I
Yeah.
am their author and their
Yes.
wisdom. So
Correct.
according to you, I means myself, not Krishna.
I means exactly, you got it. Like now you look at number
Because
15.
when I read it and I read the other translation, I believe that's Krishna talk about
Yes, it
reveal
is Krishna.
himself,
It is
right?
Krishna. It is Krishna. But the suspense is broken on line number 15.
Okay.
Line 15, verse, it says, I'm in your heart.
Oh,
You
so
have to,
line 14 is Krishna and line 15 is yourself?
yeah,
Is
but so
myself?
he says, look, you know, when you experience sun, assume that that is Krishna.
Oh.
No, wait, Jason, wait. Okay. Don't, no. What that now, when you read line number 15, that the experiencer is right in your heart, each of us heart, then now suddenly what you realize is all those lines before that, the I that he has been talking about throughout Gita, he's talking about you. It is you the whole time. It has not been Krishna. So this line 15 is supposed to be that climax, aha moment, that boom, now you look at Gita in a completely different light.
Oh,
And
so you say this chapter is the climax of the whole Gita, and this line is the climax of this chapter.
well, that line, actually, I would say the 16, right? 16 is a little more interesting one. He says that there are two Purushas. I'm reading the Aurobindo Ghosh's thing that I had asked you guys to read. I think you're looking at Gandhi's one, right? Or you're looking
No,
at
right now I look in this one.
Okay, fine. So the same thing, I think the essence is the same. It says there are two Purushas, spiritual beings in this world, the immutable and the mutable. So look at yourself, right? Within us, there is something that is constant, right? Even though you think you're old, but there is a real you, that feeling of I, that doesn't age, right? And so the mutable is all these existences, and the high-seated consciousness is called the immutable. So I would say 15 leads you to 16. 15 is more about the heart and the knowing of the Vedas, and it's still kind of talking about outside, but 16 is those two eyes that are sitting in our heart. One is this inner self, and one is the self that we confuse that we are. And so that, I would say 16 is the turning point. So if you understand 16, then you can look at the whole Gita in a completely new light.
Okay, so basically, that's it's a reading from us. Okay, so right now is before was the Krishna talking to me. I mean, assume I'm Arjuna. Okay, so
Yes.
talking to me to this moment, enter into every heart. So I'm Krishna. That's put this way.
Yes. And also, think about Arjuna's state, right? As you're listening, and this is this aha moment that you just went through yourself. But, if you really pay attention through this whole journey, he's talking about the worldly actions. He's talking about, think about the timeline when all of this was happening, right? Today, I don't think a lot of people go to the temple, but, there were God-fearing people back then. So he's talking about God, in the sense of like, what should God help you realize about yourself? And Arjuna, by this time, he's really listening to that inner voice. And that inner voice is coming from within all of us. And that calmness, that peace that we feel just by even listening to this chapter is the God.
Okay, thank you. That's Fred has a question. Yeah.
Thanks, Shashi. That was a really good explanation of this chapter. I have a question about bhakti, which you just mentioned a little bit ago. So, and relating it back to chapter 9, which is where we first encountered it, I think.
Yes.
Bhakti is devotion, which I understand is the translation of it. But
Yes.
I have this note here that says, Bhakti is the knowledge of the true self. I don't know whether I got that from your presentation or the text, or whether I just
So,
absolutely invented it on my own.
I
have
actually,
that. And so is it both the devotion and the knowledge that's really the goal of the devotion?
Yes. So let me explain, right? So there is a word in Sanskrit called as vibhakti. Vibhakti means breaking apart. So if we look at our eye, we are many eyes, as I mentioned. So when we talk about devotion, the devotion is to a deity. So what we have said is, I am now praying to this God. And that happens to be maybe 10 minutes of your day. But the idea is that you need to be constantly in the space of devotion to this God. Meaning what has happened is you have become a devotee. You identify as a devotee no matter what time of the day. So now you have become one. You're a one person, unity. And that unity now, when you have become devotee of this deity that is outside, you start recognizing that, man, this is this little statue made out of rock, and I can see God in this, but I am seeing that God in this, right? This has transformed me. So I have worked on myself. So do I need this object? Maybe not. It served its purpose, but now I can converse with myself, and now I have reached this larger self, and I can now see that same self. Maybe it is confused in that other person. Obviously, you don't want to say that, but you can sift through all of that because you have gone through that state. You've gone through the state of delusion, desires, actions, all of that stuff, right? Jealousy and everything. But somehow this devotion to this God has brought you to a point where that doesn't happen anymore to you. But that develops a certain compassion towards the person with whom that might be happening. Because you say that that is the same, it also has the same potential to reach to itself. It might not have been there, but it is on its path. So now suddenly everybody becomes the same thing, right? So your line is correct, but that journey of bhakti goes from out there to in here, to everyone. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I find that this process is highly recursive, to use a computer science term, and that
Yes.
if I want to understand chapter 15, I have to go back to earlier chapters, which in turn help me understand those earlier chapters to get back to chapter 15. So I'm always going one step forward and two steps back.
So that's what we have started doing in the last few things, right? So we covered the dejection part in the last lecture so that we understand that in the context of chapter 14, what does this dejection mean? And if you saw that summary today, it makes more sense, when I covered that. Now, next week, a couple of weeks from now, I'm going to cover karma yoga again and a little bit of bhakti yoga. So now you can look at 15 in the context of that. So we are doing these short spurts of summary as we go through 15, 16, 17, 18. So, if you guys can stick around with that, that's awesome. But yeah, I know people come and go all the time. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it is a lot of back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. Oh, Ritik, why don't you go ahead?
No, I think Jason, he was the first because he raised his
Okay,
hand
so
before me.
Jason, go ahead.
That's fine. That's fine. Ricky, you go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here all the time, so.
Yeah, I know Jason enough to kind of abuse him.
So basically, I was for more, I think from two hours, I was listening to your lecture, and one thing I encountered, because when you showed a presentation, especially about yoga, for example, like you mentioned about the Jiddu Krishnamurti, and because I know this person, Jiddu Krishnamurti, but I'm a big follower of Swami Vivekananda, because he was the
Awesome.
first person who, yeah, so he was the first person who actually delivered
Yes.
about the importance of Bhagavad Gita and the Hinduism,
Yes.
especially into the Western world. But because in those days, even before that, nobody didn't share this information to the entire
No,
world.
I'm a big fan of Vivekananda myself. So we did talk about,
Okay.
in one of the lectures, we talked about Ramakrishna Paramahansa and Vivekananda long time ago. Yeah.
So basically, like during his speech, the world in the Chicago, the World Parliament of Religions, he talked about Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga, and also in the University of Chicago. And how, I don't know much about the Harvard University, but in University of Chicago also he delivered a lecture.
Correct.
So my question is, for example, like when in today's we all are living in a 21st century with internet and all the stuff. When we talk about all the yoga and the Vedanta philosophy, it all molded up in yoga exercises. Like you do some yoga exercises
That's
to
terrible.
improve
Yeah.
your color. So I didn't understand, because there are a lot of Indians who went to United States, especially, or even the people who are from who are the big followers of Vivekananda, and also from his missionaries.
Yes.
So where they fail to deliver the right information even to the Western. For example, like even in France, if I explain to people like what is Hinduism, they have a one notion that Hinduism is just like Abrahamic religions, like what is that, Islam or Christianity, something like that. But it's not at all like it's Hinduism. It's more about a way of life. It's a philosophy,
So it's a
not at all a religion.
much more secular way of life.
Yeah.
Has nothing to
Yes,
do with
absolutely.
the religion and principles at all. So
Yes,
Hinduism in
absolutely.
that sense is not very dogmatic, but it became dogmatic, later on. But yeah, so get to the question, if you will. So what were you saying? The point you were
So
trying to
my question is because as I know that even in the Vedanta philosophy that caste system doesn't exist at all. Like it's all about quality and about way of life.
Yes.
So where it becomes wrong and how people got this false information and still they are getting the false
Oh, yes.
information in this 21st century, even in the internet revolution that we all are living in property.
Yes, yes, yes. So what was your where did they get that from? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Or you're
absolutely.
just like, yeah, no, when I started on this journey, I already had lost my faith in Hinduism completely. And I had started my journey on looking at all kinds of other things like Joseph Campbell, Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle, and then I had a bit of a sort of like, when I started looking at what Vivekananda said, what Ramakrishna Paramahansa said, and then I read a little bit about what Tilak wrote about Gita, what Mahatma Gandhi wrote about Gita. And it was amazing that we had so many people along the way whose voices were completely shut down. And the wrong voices started speaking to a lot of people because people are driven by their desires. So what they kept hearing things about is like, hey, you were born in this higher family. So they were boosting their own ego. And then they were also curbing these poor people and that happens to this day, right? There's a lot of poor people who are still, helping these high caste people and all that stuff. So the messaging of when people came to West and they started delivering this stuff, I think a lot of people do a good job, like you mentioned, Vivekananda. And there is a bunch of other people that I can name that have come out here and explained a proper way of yoga. What happened was, I think, in some situations, it is also people who are listening to something. They, like I said, right, I experience is different for everybody. Like, when I say something, what you heard is different from what Jason heard, what Dana heard, right? Everybody hears based on what they know. We can only know things based on what we know. What that means is that, so when the Western culture looked at yoga, if you presented yoga in the truest form of Patanjali, what he was talking about, Patanjali does not go into exercises right at the beginning, right? In fact, there's very little about exercises in that whole yoga thing. But the Western world gravitated towards that because of this immediate gratification with regards to, be it, hey, I want to make more money, so I need to have this calmer mind and all that stuff, right? So it was very desire oriented, and they lost the purpose of like, what is the highest ultimate goal? So I think, I don't know where I read this, or maybe it is in Gita somewhere, where Krishna says that it's okay, you can't really go and tell somebody. In fact, yeah, it is in this. Yeah, I covered that last time. And I'm going to cover that again in the summary next time in chapter 3 or chapter 4. He says that all you can do, you should never advise and you should never correct somebody. What that means is that that advice is going to go on the deaf ear. If that person is on those chakra levels, right? If he's at the body level, he will only listen to it from body perspective. If he's at a mind level, he'll only listen at the mind level. If he's at the intellect, he'll only do logicizing, argumentation. But really, if somebody has come to a crisis in their life, right? And now they read Gita. So it is important to read Gita many times in your life. A lot of Swami says that. Every time you read it, you get a different interpretation because your mindset is different. So now what has happened is you have come to a crisis in life. First of all, not many people understand crisis in its truest value. That is what I covered in the last lecture, is like, there's so much value when a crisis comes to you. Obviously, you want to fix the problem, but from that, when you're listening to these words of wisdom, they now mean something else, completely different, because now you have turned off your argumentation. So Arjuna's journey, there was a lot of argumentation at the beginning. If you see some of the questions that he's asking, up to 6 and 7 and 8, and then come 13, he's completely shut down. He's not asking any more questions. And because his logical brain is not able to take that much, not able to think, but he's able to receive. And that ability to receive is an ability that we have lost in our culture because we have made life so, I mean, there's no struggle in truest form. Obviously, there is like divorces and all of that. But when that happens, what happens is we run to a counselor, we run to a friend, and that running away to find a solution, that temporary fix, the psychic medication or whatnot, right? All that drugs and everything. So we are again trying to do these shortcut fixes to our problems. We don't really have a mechanism that kind of encourages us to kind of go and question that. This is what Jiddu Krishnamurti always covers, right? When a problem happens, he says, the last thing you want to do is go find a guru. Do not do that. Be there and try to understand what led to this, maybe your own something that has led to this. And then look at this very clinically, non-biased way. But we don't do that. Our culture actually has counseling and a lot of these things that, while they are helpful, one has to appreciate the time that, where you are a lot in sorrow, and then it becomes a personal journey. I would not blame these gurus who came here and gave maybe a good information, wrong information. It is the receiver that is the problem, I would say. Not a problem, but I think it's his journey. It's their journey. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Okay. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a great point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ritik. Yeah.
So
All right.
Yeah, we make to this point is not easy, but I still hope everyone can join, and even it's first time. Okay, but
Yeah.
just like you said, each one is continue, but you can take a semi-independent.
You can do. Yeah, you can come
You
and
can
join.
take you don't
Ritik, did you want to say something?
one last thing. There's a joke. Actually,
Oh.
like because I read a lot of side by side. I read a lot of like the books of these motivational speakers, and I feel like these people also copy and pasted a lot of things from
Oh,
Bhagavad
yes.
Gita. Because for example, like conquer your fear or something like that, I feel like they also copy and pasted lots and lots of things from
Yeah, yeah.
Bhagavad
They
Gita.
try to come up with management skills, right, from this. And also, what is it I was going to say? Yeah, there's a lot of Western philosophy. There is that guy, Sisak or somebody, he has a very strong Eastern European accent. He's amazing. He basically says that all the things that you see these philosophers in Germany and everywhere, after a certain, like Schopenhauer, and after that, it almost seems like they are ripping out the ideas from Eastern Hindu philosophy, right? They're taking that, they're reading that, they're converting that, morphing it with whatever half interpretation that they have, and then they are talking about it, right, in their form, and then that becomes the Western philosophical state.
Western philosophy.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's a journey. It's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Donna.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, everybody. We'll meet.
yeah, and next week
So much.
we.
Thank you so much, Shashi. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Sachi.
Bye bye. Next time.
Yeah. Next time. Bye.